Welcome back. This is King Rex doing another video. In this video, I'll rank the James Bond henchmen. I previously did the main villains, and so this one, it's just these are basically people that work for the main villain. I did my best to limit it to one henchman per movie. There were a few movies where I couldn't decide on just one, and you'll see how I handled those. So there's I think three of them that I didn't decide on one. And then there's one henchman that actually was the main henchman in two different movies. So without further ado, we're going to start with the list. I'm going to do some honorable mentions. Last time when I did honorable mentions, I did all the um, secondary villains that the series had, but there's so many henchmen. I'm only going to mention some of the bigger ones or the ones that I thought were kind of better in this honorable mentions. First, Miss Taro from Doctor No. She's kind of a bit of a femme fatale. Basically, she tries to set James Bond up to get him killed. He's supposed to go on a date with her, but she sends someone to kill him. Then he shows up for the date, and you can see the surprise. Basically, she's just not quite to the level of being the main henchman in that film. I'd go with someone else. The next honorable mention is Whisper out of Live and Let Die. There was a whole menagerie of good hench people around the main villain in this movie. I did choose two from that movie for the list, and Whisper would basically be like the number three guy I would put on the list. But he just isn't enough of a main henchman to be put on this list. But once again, I thought he was a pretty good character, and he actually plays a pretty decent role in a few different parts of the movie. And then we get Naomi from Spy Who Loved Me. She would have been a great femme fatale. Once again, Jaws was the main henchman. I think if she'd have been in another movie and had a bit of a bigger role, she could have made the list. Something like maybe For Your Eyes Only or something, but where the henchman just was kind of so-so. But once again, someone that had a lot of potential, just not quite enough to be the main henchman. Um, Mishka and Grishka, once again, this was a good duo. But I went with another person as the main henchman. They also don't get a lot of screen time, but I think the idea was really good. Once again, I think they're pretty good. I'd actually most all these people here I would actually rate above some of the bottom henchmen, even with their limited rules. Boris Grishenko. Basically, he's just kind of like a computer nerd guy, but he actually does a really great job in the role. He just isn't quite enough to get him moved to the main henchman list for me. Henry Gupta from Tomorrow Never Dies is like Boris Grushenko is in GoldenEye. They're kind of very similar henchmen. Once again, I like both these characters a lot, but there's just someone that's a bigger henchman ahead of them. Dr. Kaufman, he would have been a great main Bond henchman, except he has a very small role in Tomorrow Never Dies. I think if it was just rating henchmen without worrying about how big the role was, he would be hurt a little bit from how small his role is, but he'd still be a pretty highly rated henchman. But he's just not enough to be a main henchman for me. And last, we're gonna go with Logan Ash. He's basically the guy that he actually recruited the main henchman for the movie he was in, and he's basically sells out Felix Leiter and kills him. But not the main henchman. Probably better than the main henchman was in his movie. I'd say, well, Dr. Kaufman because he's so good, but most of these aren't as good as the main henchman in their movie. But I would actually say that he actually was better. He just wasn't the main henchman. Now we're going to start with our lists. Number 26, I go with Primo in No Time to Die. Originally, I was going to put him this low, but I was kind of going over lists. And one thing about him, basically his main thing seems to be that he's just kind of odd looking. He also tends to fail in every turn in one way or another, even when it seems like he's not failing, he's failing. I'd also put him kind of down the list simply because the writing is so bad. He's a major part of that bad writing within the movie that he's in. Um, in the first scene in the movie, he actually dies. James Bond strangles him to death, but then he comes back for the scene in Cuba, which is the best scene of the movie, or the Cuban scenes. But he actually comes back and he steals the nanobots, which he doesn't realize that they want him to steal them because he delivers them to Spectre, and everyone at Spectre works for Spectre is supposed to have nanobots that will target him and kill them. And he's at the party where this happens, but he somehow doesn't die there when he would presumably die. And then he's later recruited um, by Logan Ash to join. Uh, I can't think of his name. Rami Malek's character, a Safin, which I don't know why they would pick him up because he was pretty incompetent. And then he dies at the end in the fight to Bond. So he's basically incompetent. The writing around him was bad because he was supposed to die once, should have died a second time. Um, just that's why he's here because it's incompetent. And really, it seems like the only thing about him is they just made him look weird to try to make him like a main Bond henchman because we're some weird looking ones at times. But he really doesn't do much more than look weird. If he didn't have the weird eye, which meant he was pretty high up Blofeld's list because they used that eye for Blofeld to see through because the eye Blofeld had was connected to that one. So just I don't know. I just think that the writing, especially around him, is quite bad, and there's nothing really special about him. The next one is Elvis, who was originally my last ranked one. This guy, once again, is just like Primo. He's completely ineffective in everything he does. At one point, he's supposed to kill Bond, but he gets tripped going up the stairs. I think he dies in a big explosion. He's pretty much just made to look weird with that kind of weird bowl cut, which you think's a bad haircut, and here it's a bad hairpiece. Very ineffective, not scary at all. I don't think anyone would be. At least with Primo, you might be afraid of that guy a little bit. This guy, I mean, this would be like trying to run away from Mr. Rogers. That's about how scary he is. So I just think he was totally ineffective and kind of a joke of a henchman. One of the big things against Quantum of Solace is that had a bad villain and a bad henchman. This one's probably going to get under some people's skin because I know a lot of people really like him. But LeCue from For Your Eyes Only, he kind of was a stand-in as the main bad guy at the beginning of the movie until we learned that Christophus is the bad guy. But he's just kind of uninteresting, and I think he dies about halfway through the movie. I just don't see him as being that. I think the idea would have been good having this kind of gun for hire slash assassin type person as a main henchman, but he just doesn't. I just don't think he's very interesting. He kind of just doesn't do a lot. They try to make him be the silent type or kind of quiet type, but he's not physically imposing, and that really only works when it's someone that's silent and physically imposing. Um, Necros from The Living Daylights. This is another one a lot of people really like. I was actually surprised to see how much people like him when I was kind of looking online. Some rankings people have. I don't know if these two are ranked higher because people like those movies a bit more, but he's basically just kind of the cookie cutter, strong, blonde, Aryan looking type that kind of started with Red Grant that they've tried to do several times throughout the series. A couple guys they did this with that didn't make the list are Hans from You Only Live Twice and Eric Kriegler from For Your Eyes Only. Both of these guys are they're all three kind of cookie cutter the same. I will admit that Necros is the most interesting of them, but Necros is also the main henchman in The Living Daylights, where these two guys are just kind of secondary henchmen. Um, the only real interesting thing is that he kind of does, try to use disguises a bit, whereas the other guys really don't, but they're all kind of very similar, big, blonde, brutish henchmen. 22nd is Zhao from Die Another Day. At the beginning of the movie, before he gets the weird surgery stuff that makes him kind of look like this freakish look, kind of another one that's more just strange looking than good, like a couple of the earlier ones we had. He was actually decent, but then when he went through this kind of therapy stuff that DNA therapy that makes him look this way. Plus, if you're going to try to change the way you look, you had diamonds embedded in your face from an explosion, which I don't know how that works. Wouldn't the first thing you do be to remove the diamonds before you do anything else? He's kind of just a humdrum henchman. There's a good car chase scene with him in it. And he's actually kind of good in the first scene in the movie, where he gets the diamonds blown into his face. But after that, he kind of goes downhill, which is pretty much the theme of Die Another Day. It starts out good and it just kind of goes downhill a lot. Valenka from Casino Royale, I did have a hard time on this movie, because it really isn't a main henchman, but she was the closest I could find. She tries to poison James. She actually does poison James Bond, so she did come the closest of all the henchmen to killing James Bond. So that's kind of I guess, would be a point in her favor because she almost killed him with the poison. But she's pretty much the Schiff's girlfriend and not a great henchman. So this is why she kind of falls low here. She's kind of on the list by default of me making sure there was someone from each movie on the list, and that's how she makes it to this position. Number 20 is Patrice from Skyfall. I know there's a lot of the Daniel Craig ones down low, but that was one of the weak points of his movies. They didn't make great henchmen, and this guy really isn't as much a henchman as a hired assassin. But once again, there just wasn't anybody better. As good as they were at creating Silva, you think they would have given him a pretty good henchman, but they don't really do that. Maybe everything was put into Silva and that storyline that they didn't really have a good henchman, but that's kind of what. But Patrice is the closest thing. He does have some good action scenes within the movie. That's why he kind of ranks higher than LeCue, who was from For Your Eyes Only as a henchman, who's kind of the same type of character. I think he's a better version of that, and that's why he's up to number 20. Number 19 is Professor Dent, played by Anthony Dawson and Dr. No. I kind of like this picture of him where he's kind of afraid of the spider. I know people kind of say it's kind of ridiculous to be afraid of like a tarantula, but first off, not everyone would have known that that big spider was a tarantula. And tarantulas do have venom. It just isn't enough to kill humans. But there are some big spiders from down in Central and South America, like the Brazilian banana spider that can kill people. I don't know how much different it looks from a tarantula, but people really didn't know a lot about that. And in the book, it was a centipede, but centipedes can't kill humans either. But I just think he did a decent job. He actually is the guy that is physically Blofeld in From Russia with Love and Thunderball. It's not his voice, but he is the guy that you see sitting there. But they couldn't use him because they already used him in Doctor No. But in those movies, I think the Blofeld was pretty good. So, but he doesn't get any points right. This is only who is Professor Dent. He's kind of an unwilling henchman because he was a scientist that Doctor No pretty much forces to, do his bidding. You can kind of see he doesn't really want to do that here. So it does show that there's a fear of Doctor No, like there kind of was a fear of Blofeld shown in From Russia with Love with Rosa Klebb. Mr. Henchmen set up to number 18. His main thing was I guess they're supposed to be stone thumbnails. To me, I kind of got that they were made out of like iron or steel. Maybe they're stone, maybe they're iron or steel, but I just kind of got that they were iron, but I guess they're stone. He tries to be a henchman in the lines of like a Jaws or a Odd Job. He does a decent job, but they don't really build Mr. Hinks up like Jaws and Odd Job are built up through the movie. I don't think Mr. Hinks gets the build up to make him that great henchman that they were. But he's definitely the best henchman of the Daniel Craig era. If you look at it from Die Another Day on, there really wasn't great henchmen at all, which I think is kind of why those movies suffer a little bit. Mayday, I know this will make a lot of people mad, but I just never was a fan of this character. I think Grace Jones does a good job with her. A lot of people consider her and Max Zorn as the main highlights of View to a Kill. But to me, Mayday I'm not saying she's bad. Like, even being this low on the list doesn't necessarily mean you're bad. It just means that everyone else is better than you. That's what a lot of this is. I'll admit the bottom few I consider to be bad henchmen. But anyone in this top 19 is good. It's just that there was someone better than them and more people that are better. Um, but that's why Grace Jones falls to here on the list for me. Mr. Stamper and Tomorrow Never Dies. So another, he's kind of in the line of the blondes, like cookie cutter henchman, but I think he's got more to him than the other ones, like Necros and that. So I do rate him a little more highly. I think he's a bit more menacing too, where he's more just bad to be bad, and the bad guy is more just trying to get money. And I think it makes him a little bit better of a henchman. He seems to be a bit more menacing, a bit more cold hearted than some of the other ones that are just following orders. I think he more enjoys it, and it shows that way. I think he's a little bit better written. Number 15 is Baron Samedi, um, for Live and Let Die. I'm the first of two people I picked from that movie. His main negative is that he's just not in the movie a whole lot because they have a whole bunch of different henchmen they use throughout that movie. Which I like that idea of having a lot of varied henchmen that are all interesting rather than a interesting villain, one interesting henchman, and the rest of them are kind of just in the background as like just generic henchmen. There's actually some character to these other henchmen within the movie, which includes Whisper, the guy that was the cab driver. I don't think he's even named, and there's a couple other ones that were there. I think he had about 5 or 6 henchmen that were memorable in that movie, which is probably the most of any Bond movie to have that many memorable henchmen. So he does only make it up to 15, but that was more or less. There just wasn't enough screen time to explore him, or even at the ending here. This is the ending where you could think that he might come back. Helga Brandt from You Only Live Twice. This one, if you'd have asked me before I ever went through rankings and did them where I thought I would put her, I probably would have said top 10. So I was actually kind of surprised myself how far down I had her because I've seen people ranking henchmen. I'm like, I always think to myself, she's better than that. I think she kind of suffers from the fact that she's a lot like Fiona Volpe or Volpe, who was in the previous movie Thunderball, except she just isn't quite as good as her. In fact, when I watched You Only Live Twice, I didn't watch those movies super close together. I actually thought it was the same character again. Because they do look a lot alike. And if you watch Thunderball and come back a month later and watch You Only Live Twice, you could maybe think that, hey, this is the same character. Because I know that Fiona Volpe was shot, but she could possibly survive being shot in the back. Although, granted, she doesn't. But I could see where people, especially if you went more time where you might not quite remember that part of it, you just see this redhead, you might think, hey, that's the same redhead again. So I actually did think that they were the same character the first time I watched those movies. I know it was at least a month apart, maybe longer. I think she's pretty good. It's just, once again, these people here that are in the second 10 are just pushed down by better henchmen. That's what keeps them out of the top 10. Irma Butt, another one, I would have said was a top 10 from on Her Majesty's Secret Service. I really do believe that she gives the best performance in that whole movie. I think she's the bright spot. This here's the end scene where she shoots at James Bond and hits Tracy Bond. She actually gets away with it. She's one of the henchmen that never dies. She's never punished, so she actually gets away. She kills Tracy Bond, and she actually gets away with it. She's never caught. She never dies. This is as far as we see on screen, so she does actually get away with it. And even before that part, she was very good in the role of kind of the strict house mother type. I think she just does a great job with that. So once again, to me, my knee jerk reaction if I saw this would be that she should be higher than that. But it's really just that there's better people that make it above her. Not that she's this low because of anything she did wrong. It's just others did it better. Number 12 is Dario by Benicio del Toro from License to Kill. Most people put him up in the top 5 or 10, and I think part of it is because it's Benicio del Toro. He does a great job here. This is actually, believe it or not, only the second movie he made. Um, Part of where he suffers is the fact that there's long stretches of the movie that he's just not in it, so he doesn't really get the screen time that he should. And there's also a lot of good acting going on in that movie. You have two Bond girls that both act well. That either one of them could be considered the main Bond girl until the very end scene. Um, Robert Davey, he has to act across from him, who does a great job. This is the most we see Desmond Llewellyn as Q in any movie. It's his best performance. It's the best performance for Timothy Dalton, although he's only in two. It's his better of those two performances. So the movie really, honestly, had a lot of great acting in it, and he has a smaller role than a lot of henchmen do, but I think he does a great job of being very menacing. He fits the role perfectly. The next one is Teehee from Live and Let Die. Once again, kind of like Dario, kind of like Samedy, where he has a smaller role because he's like the main henchman for about half the movie. Samedy's the main one for part of it. There's other characters in it, but the guy's always dressed to the hilt. The claw hand works well here. It doesn't just seem like some weird quirk they put in to put a weird quirk in, like you kind of have with the crazy eye with um, uh, Primo, or the weird hairpiece you have with Elvis. Just a great performance, always smiling. I mean, the guy brightens up every scene he's in. You can see he's tough, but he's a tough guy that isn't silent. A lot of times the tough guys are the quiet, silent ones, but he's really not that way. He's a little more, he's more verbal, kind of maniacal. Like he uses the food and the crocodiles to kill Bond rather than try to just kill him with brute force, which you would think he could kill him easily with brute force. So that shows a little ingenuity on his side. Once again, he's pushed down because he just doesn't get as much screen time as a lot of other main henchmen because it's kind of a menagerie of henchmen rather than just one main henchman and a bunch of side ones. Number 10, Gobinda out of Octopussy. This guy's a lot like, to me, he's a lot like Oddjob. I think that would be the closest one to him. I think this is one of the three kind of silent henchmen that they just did a really excellent job with. I don't know if he ever speaks a word throughout the entire movie. He kind of gives a look at the end scene where he's asked to climb out on the plane to get Bond. This is the scene where he crushes the dice in his hand and the powder. But I think he does a great performance. He doesn't just seem cookie cutter. He's enough different from like Odd Job and Jaws that he's not just like some cookie cutter. Obviously, they were wanting another henchman like that. I think he does a great job. That's why he makes it to the top 10. This is another one, though. If you'd asked me knee jerk, I would have probably said top 5 without thinking about it. But after doing the list, he does only get into the top 10. Number 9, this is the way I handle two henchmen from the same movie. But I believe every scene they're in together. So they kind of are a dynamic duo, Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd. Pretty much odd ducks, very strange characters. It works great. Um, they very odd, but they're very maniacal. You can tell they take joy in being bad guys. They do seem like the type that would be that would have been hired out as henchmen more than the type that you would actually have. More than the type that were just always worked for Blofeld. They seem like they'd have been more like mercenaries than, but they work well together. They go the whole way throughout the movie. I know a lot of people don't like them because of how strange they are. A lot of people rate them down low because they don't like the movie. That's one thing I find too. And some of these lists, if it's a movie they like better, they rank the henchmen a little higher than they should. Movie they like less, they rank them lower. I put them where I believe they belong. And I believe they do make their way up just because they're so odd and it works so well to number 9. Number 8 is Morena Frost. This is one from a movie that I put down low as probably a bottom 5 Bond movie, but she was great in it. I'd say her and the performance of Bond by Pierce Brosnan are the two best parts of this movie. And a lot of what else is going on in that movie's kind of leaves a lot to be desired. The first part's great, but the point which Bond goes to Bermuda, it just starts going downhill from there. But I think she does a great job in this movie. She's the best part of the second half of the movie, hands down. Um, she does. I actually liked her better than Jinx. I thought you should be rooting for the good guy Bond girl, but she's actually more likable than Jinx was in the movie, which is pretty bad because you're not supposed to like her. But I thought she was such a better role in that movie that I actually liked her better. Number seven is Renard, played by Robert Carlyle from The World Is Not Enough. Um, some people try to say he's a side villain or he's the main villain, but she might have been the main villain when if you look at the backstory where he's the one that took Elektra, but in the movie he's definitely doing her bidding. So the main villain in the movie is Elektra, and he's the henchman. I think he's a really great henchman. Once again, he's only this low because the guys above him are just so excellent that it's hard to move up at all beyond this point. Um, I think a lot of people kind of complain that he's got the he don't feel pain thing, but he does it well. Like I said, I think he's just a great henchman. Um, and he's actually kind of funny that he's actually, if you look at it from a a senses thing, he doesn't have this. He's losing his like sense of feel. But if you look at it from the way they feel as far as mentally, like he's a more feeling person, and Elektra's kind of the cold one where he's not. So I think that's actually a good dynamic that they were kind of opposites of one another. Number six is Nicknack from The Man with the Golden Gun. This is a one of the henchmen um, main villain combos I absolutely love. Um, Nicknack was a little guy, so you'd think he'd be the villain, and the big imposing guy, the 6'5" Christopher Lee, would be the henchman. But it's reversed, and they both play the roles to perfection. I think the way these two people play these two roles goes a long way to making The Man with the Golden Gun such a good movie. They really are the two best parts of that movie. Red Grant, this is one that a lot of people put first, but there's four guys I think were better henchmen. And From Russia with Love, he does a great job. But like I said, there's just those four I think are better. He's kind of is the one they try to remake as a henchman, but they never quite hit it because even though he's a big, imposing, strong, blonde guy, he is more than that. A lot of those other guys really aren't nothing more than muscle. He does have brains. He can think for himself. He doesn't just blindly follow orders. In fact, it's him going kind of off base and off order that it leads to his demise because he wants the money from the suitcases, and Bond's able to trick him into going for the money in one of the suitcases, which causes basically him to lose the upper hand. Fiona Volpe from Thunderball, absolutely amazing first femme fatale in the series. Realistically, I would have thought she would have been higher as well. I'd say her and Domino are the two best Bond girls from the Sean Connery era. She falls into the henchman category as the main henchman of Thunderball. Um, One of the best parts of that entire movie. I think she just plays the role to perfection. Xena Onatopp, Famke Janssen from GoldenEye, another great henchman. That movie actually has four great villains in it. Her, the General, Boris, and Alec are all great villains. She's the main henchman. She's just she's a bit over the top, but she's over the top in the right manner that it all works well. Realistically, she's only this low as third because the other two I think were just basically done pretty much perfectly as henchmen or as close as you can get. This comes to my number two henchman, which is Oddjob from Goldfinger. This makes Goldfinger the movie with the best henchman main villain combo because I had Art Goldfinger is the number one villain and Oddjob is the number two henchman. He plays the role pretty much to perfection. You really couldn't improve on anything he did. He plays the silent, physically imposing, almost the guy you can't beat with brute force. In fact, James Bond pretty much has to outsmart him and electrocute him in order to beat him. He's willing to do pretty much anything that Goldfinger tells him to. Realistically, he's only number two because there's just one that just edges him out for number one. They're so close they could almost be swapped. But my number one, I do put first overall. I do think he's a little bit better, and that's Jaws from The Spy Who Loved Me and also from Moonraker. He's absolutely perfect, and The Spy Who Loved Me, you couldn't improve on him in any way. He's really almost like a horror movie type character. So he's even scarier. He's not just big and physically imposing and strong, but he's actually scary in a manner in which Oddjob really isn't. In Moonraker, they do go a little more comedic with him, but he's still a big, scary, imposing guy. If you watch the scene where he's in the alleyway, um, that is probably one of the scariest scenes in the entire series. The only little thing I think they didn't do perfect with them was at the end of Moonraker. They do have him talk when he says, "Here's to us" or something, toast the champagne. They should have just had him toast the champagne without saying anything. That would have made for a perfect movie as far as Jaws goes there. But he does make my number one overall on the list of henchmen. Thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, comment, and have a great day.